and good afternoon or evening, everybody. I wanted to talk tonight a few minutes about validation and what I guess we call healthy validation and maybe validation that's not so healthy. And it's something we often see with addiction. And I think it's important to kind of dive into it a little bit to see what's going on. And I think a lot of these issues, when somebody has an issue with self-worth or self-esteem or is excessively dependent on validation from outside themselves, we go way back in their lives. And it usually starts with some kind of trauma, some kind of neglect, some kind of bullying, or just messages from parents, sisters, brothers, family, peers, church, everybody have the possibility to give kind of negative feedback and really undermine a child's sense of self-worth. And these are where what we call core beliefs are formed. These are these I statements. I am unlovable. I am unsafe. I am unworthy. Or the only way I can be worthy is if I have to work hard to validate, to get that validation from someone else. I have to work extra hard to prove myself worthy of attention or affection or love. And so that really sets the stage for addiction later in life. So consequently, 20 years later, we see a lot of addicts that have a lot of issues around validation. And what they've done is, unfortunately, they didn't learn how to get that sense of validation internally. It becomes dependent on external factors, people acknowledging them, giving them validation from the outside. And it feels good. Many times when someone does get that validation, it equals acceptance, that accepting, belonging, being kind of part of the tribe. And when they don't get it, it can actually feel bad. It can drop them into some sort of depression. How does this manifest? In so many different ways. We talk about people living for their achievements, right? Or the car they drive, or the job they have, or the income, or their trophy wife, or their trophy husband, or their beautiful house, or their trips, their education. And unfortunately, I think this is something that's really been aggravated by Facebook and how we construct these lives on Facebook that are picture perfect. And actually, as a therapist, I see a lot of people who have gotten quite depressed comparing their actual real life to these lives of people they see on Facebook, and these kind of highly curated, manufactured lives that people post on social media. So it's actually become kind of a dynamic and undermining people's sense of self-worth, because they're comparing themselves to the presentation of other people's lives. So something we really have to look for. But people are seeking this validation, and when they don't get it, that causes a lot of anxiety and fear. So strategies that people do, sometimes they become people pleasers, are afraid to be their true selves or take care of themselves. And they don't even know eventually what they feel, because they're so attuned to responding to other people's needs, they kind of lose track of their own needs and what they actually feel sometimes. This is very common with addiction. When we get people in treatment, very often they really have a hard time acknowledging or naming different emotions. We actually have a little cheat sheet with emojis of different feelings to kind of help them out with that. So oftentimes there's a lot of what we call enmeshment at the same time. We become enmeshed in other people's needs, boundaries get kind of blurry. So you get really kind of unhelpful and unhealthy family dynamics that can happen. So really what has to happen if this is the case where we're seeking validation from outside, we have to sort of learn how to do it internally. And I will mention this creation of false selves. When we are constructing this person that's worthy of validation from the outside world, if we're feeling we don't have it on the inside, it's often described as a false self. And those are the cars, the income, the beautiful people in our arms, the trips we've taken, all that is out here. And the irony of this is that can also get a lot of attention. People do notice that, or they comment. People live for likes and shares on Facebook, or the comments they get from all the fabulous stuff they're doing on the outside, but it doesn't connect with their inside. They're still inside that false self, inside that shell is the same person that's feeling unworthy. And they know that all these compliments and validation are coming to them, but it's not coming for who they are. It's coming for this kind of false self they've constructed around them. So ironically, they may get a lot of attention and get a lot of a validation, but it doesn't really get through to where they're really feeling bad about themselves. So where's the healing in this? What do? We look at really how can we validate ourselves? And there's a couple of things here. We try to really not rely on others to validate ourselves, but to generate that internally. And that can be a difficult climb for some people. But when we do this, we start to feel increasingly more connected with ourselves, with our inner selves. We become integrated, if you will, and that word also related to integrity, keep in mind. But we become these different parts of ourselves that we've kind of divided up and compartmentalized slowly start to come together, and there's a unity that starts to emerge among them. Ironically too, once we get that unity and we start to feel better about ourselves, we feel stronger and we can start to maybe look at or accept things about ourselves that we couldn't tolerate looking at before. Maybe I have some bad habits or some destructive thinking patterns, or I don't even know what, just as an example, but maybe I couldn't, before I was so kind of fragile in terms of my validation, I really couldn't go there. I didn't want to see that, I couldn't deal with it. But as I start to recover and feel better and stronger about myself, I'm able to tolerate looking at things, gee, that's not so cool. Maybe I need to change that or work on that part of myself. So we become more comfortable actually working and taking some of those changes into account. Along that same line, we start to be able to recognize our strengths and our shortcomings. That maybe sounds like familiar 12-step language there, but as we gain this awareness, we have a more realistic picture of ourselves. We're not constantly seeking validation, starting from a deficit in our own self-worth, but we're starting to feel better about ourselves, our achievements, and connected and integrated. And so we can see our strengths, and we can also see our shortcomings as we start to do that. We can step out of our comfort zone. And this is where it starts to really get important for addiction recovery, I think. When we are seeking validation from outside, it's a very risk-averse way to be in that sense of social interaction. And so people often get very rigid and very kind of stuck in their ways, because the fear or the anxiety caused by kind of stepping out of who they have been to become something better can be a little threatening and intimidating. So as we get to feel better about ourselves, we have more confidence and we can take more chances in terms of recovery, take a step, try living without a certain addictive behavior, or acknowledging that it's really become a problem. And along with this manifestation, we can really start to lose old survival mechanisms that really don't serve us anymore. When we're small and have trauma or abuse or bullying, we have these ways of dealing with it. And often it's addiction. We kind of numb those feelings, we escape, we distract ourselves with certain behaviors and sex or porn. It's all a way to kind of manage feelings, but it's not a very helpful way. As we get more integrated and allow ourselves to generate our validation and self-sense worth internally, then we really start to be able to drop those old survival mechanisms that really don't serve us anymore. And then finally, we can start making better choices. It starts to spill over into every aspect of our life. But the final thing, I think the goal of this, and it's just such a simple sentence, but it's such a triumph for a lot of addicts and partners of addicts, for sure. And that's a simple statement. We feel that we are enough. I am enough just as I am. And that's a statement that I believe for the most part on most days today, but that's something when I was in my disease that was felt like it was on Mars. It was so far away. So that beautiful statement, we feel that we are enough, is the bottom line for validation. And that can be generated from inside and how we feel about ourselves and how we work in the world. So I think I'll stop with that. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, David. Ask us questions about validation or anything to do with addiction, recovery, relationships, all of that good stuff. Type them into the Q&A feature. We will get to them. We'll get to as many as we can. So, quick question. I was raised, there were several unhealthy messages that I learned in my childhood. One of them was that what other people think of me is far more important than what I think of me.
Wow.
And coupling that with, yeah, you're better than everyone else, but you'll never be good enough. That was an interesting message.
Yeah.
And the other message was, you can do anything you want as long as I do it for you. A lovely message to get from my mother. Those things that, they really did a number on me. And not only did it create a deep sense of shame, but it created a false front and compartmentalization and all of the things that addicts are so good at.
Right.
I had wonderful training for being an addict. And I came into recovery with basically no self-esteem, although I pretend that I had self-esteem. And my question is, does acting as if, but in a different way, can that help? Because I was told, if you want to develop self-esteem, act in esteem, behave in esteemable ways,
Right.
act like someone who has self-esteem. And they were saying to behave differently, whereas, I would just mouth, it was lip service before, but
Right.
will that work over time?
I think it's an essential feature of the healing, but I don't think it's the whole story. So I think, yeah, we have to sometimes, and most times actually, I think with behavior change, we have to start doing the new behavior, even though it feels uncomfortable, it doesn't feel natural, and it's not really generating from inside us, but it does help, and it does start to lay down new neural pathways, and we can start to make those adjustments and changes. But I think to really make changes in terms of validation, we have to do that. We have to change the behavior, but we also have to do some repair work on who we believe we are on the inside. And I think just changing behavior doesn't go a long way toward really shaking up those core beliefs, the negative kind of destructive core beliefs. So I think we have to do work. We have to do therapy. We have to be in group, or we have to do some kind of work on ourselves in whatever form to kind of really help go along with that behavior change. So the behavior is certainly an essential part of it, but I think we need to do more to really make the change for validation.
It's kind of a two-pronged
approach. It's definitely a two-pronged, exactly.
I actually change my external behavior, but I need to change my internal thinking.
Right, because I think it'll always feel kind of false if you don't really work on the inside, and it's just really another false front,
Yeah, it really did feel false for a couple of years. Yeah.
But I think, you did the step work and all the other kind of therapy work you needed to do to bring your insides along with your outside, and I think they merged then. But
yeah, you used the word integrity earlier, which I love that word. We named our company Seeking Integrity. I know we all like that word, and we really are, as people who work at Seeking Integrity, we're all seeking integrity. But I think the people that we work with are also, whether they know it or not, they're seeking integrity. I want my insides to match the outsides.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, throughout most of my addictions, the outside looked pretty good. But inside, I was just such a mess.
Yeah, same here.
And then the outside fell apart too, which happened.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's jump to our Q&A. As the partner of a sex addict, I keep hearing about sex addicts' fear of emotional intimacy and their fear of us. How is this overcome? Great question.
That's a beautiful question. So yeah, we often describe sex and porn addiction, and a lot of addiction in general, as intimacy disorders. And the reason we do that, or the reason we call that, is because a lot of people have trouble really developing close relationships. And we can go through the motions, we can do the act, as we were just talking about, change the behavior, but at some level, there's going to be some problems. And the roots of that really lie in our experiences as children often, but the lessons we learn in how we can rely on or not rely on other people, other important people to us. So if our caregivers, those could be parents or whoever, we're consistently available, then we're pretty secure about knowing that, gee, I can express myself, or I can have an argument with somebody and have a difference of opinion and express it, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be all okay because this relationship is strong, it's safe, it's consistent, and it has room within the relationship for some disagreements or whatever. But if that early on the childhood caregivers were inconsistent or unavailable, or as we've talked about a lot on this webinar, or negligent, there's that emotional negligence of not being attuned to a kid's feelings and emotions. If that kind of stuff is going on, then we develop some of these dysfunctional patterns. And so along with that comes these beliefs about other people, and they have to do with our trust. Do we trust someone at all, or at different levels? How vulnerable are we around these people? Do we feel safe to really share our insides? And a lot of addicts really don't have a lot of those skills in terms of trust and being vulnerable and learning how to connect. There's an interesting work being done on relationship styles where there's the anxious person about a relationship, or secure, or anxious avoidant, and it's all this kind of different levels of comfort with closeness. And there's different styles that people have. And we do that, by the way, on the Guys to Come Through program. That's built into one of our assessments, that particular test. But so I think there's ways. Can it be fixed? Yes. We can relearn intimacy. One of the lessons we teach the guys at Seeking Integrity is that intimacy, of course, occurs between husband and wife, or partners, or spouse, and kids, and even close friends. But intimacy occurs in all kinds of relationships, including non-sexual relationships. And so when we're sitting around in group therapy at Seeking Integrity, and we're really sharing stuff from our hearts and getting feedback and getting honest feedback, and sometimes sharing difficult things about ourselves, that's trust, that's vulnerability. Those are the building blocks of intimacy. And I really believe that our guys, when they get out of the program, have some skills to start repairing that intimacy. But I think we take it for granted that adults know how to do that. And I think a lot of people don't. And so it is something absolutely that can be repaired and fixed. But I think at the bottom, you use the word fear of us. And I think you're right. There's anxiety. There's anxiety about letting somebody too close, because they may abandon me. They may overwhelm me. They may hurt me. They may be here today, but not tomorrow. So, I mean, there's all this stuff, that old tapes that are playing in the background that interfere with it. So I think it's definitely something that's worthwhile. But, I'll tell you, when I did my book, Lust, Men, and Meth, the subtitle was A Gay Man's Guide to Sex and Intimacy. And my kind of working thesis was that addiction, these guys were all sort of cool with relationships and intimacy, and then addiction came along and it broke it all apart. But what I realized that every addict probably, and probably most people, don't have those intimacies. I never had it. It wasn't about reclaiming anything in my recovery. It was about learning for the first time. I think that's the case of a lot of addicts who are really learning for the first time in recovery how to be safe and really connect around somebody, even somebody they love very much. So yeah, long answer to a short question.
Yeah, I'm going to make it longer though. There's a joke in AA. Somebody will say, "Oh, I really want to be in a relationship," and the sponsor will say, "Buy a plant." Start small. Start with something that can't hurt you. Then progress to a dog. Then then you may maybe you can start. But in partners, if you're already in relationship with the addict, you're likely to see the addict being really open and intimate and honest with his therapy group or her therapy group, and with the sponsor and with fellows in recovery before that starts to happen with you again. And the reason for that is, my sponsor is not going to, if my sponsor gets mad at me, it's not going to hurt nearly as bad as if you get mad at me. If some random person in my therapy group lets me down, it's not going to hurt nearly as bad as if you let me down. So it's actually a compliment to the partner. You're the one that matters the most, so you're the one who can do the most damage. And when the message that's going on in our head is, the people I love cannot be trusted to meet my needs, which is certainly the message I grew up with. It's, the closer you are to me, the harder it is for me to open up. So oftentimes partners of addicts, especially sex addicts, are the last ones to get the true vulnerability from the addict. We kind of have to, we start with the houseplant and we work our way up to a person, basically. We start with the outer circle and we work our way into the most important person. So be patient, but and I think it's okay for a betrayed partner to say, feels like you're more intimate with your sponsor than me right now.
Yeah.
Can we work on that? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, David? Or
I think I've seen that. I think that's the dynamic that happens. It's a gradual building from that inner circle of colleagues and peers toward the partner. That often happens and is actually the developmental case. And I think just communication. The other thing I think that people don't know how to be intimate so much because of some of these beliefs and fears. But I think the other thing that we're really deficient in is communication and listening, just basic how to talk to each other. And I think there's one of the great benefits of couples therapy is just learning those skills. Because it sounds easy enough. Why don't I just speak? But people speak past each other. They don't hear the message correctly. I'm not hearing what you actually said. I'm hearing what I think you said, and just there's things start to fly around. So really learning how to communicate adequately probably speeds up that process of healing.
I love this next question. Directly applicable to me as a person who was having a bad day yesterday and broke down and coughed up the dough for Disney Plus so I could watch all the Star Wars stuff. Can a person be addicted to TV? As the partner of an addict, I've been working on family of origin issues as part of my recovery and really feel like trauma from my first, what I finally come to acceptance was an emotionally abusive, and from my first, from an emotionally abuseful and neglected marriage with someone I started dating at 16. My first husband was not a conventional addict. He actually abstained from alcohol and drugs because his father was an alcoholic, but he was consumed with watching TV. He put on the TV if he walked into a room to put on his socks. We had a bet with several friends about who could hold out longer on a habit. His was TV, and he was the first to lose and become physically sick. So can a person become addicted to TV?
Short answer, yes. We were just going over this today in a lecture. There are kind of two directions of addictive behavior. One is kind of intensity, arousal, a lot of amphetamines, a lot of sex addiction, porn addiction, sexual acting out, all that side of the behavior. The other side is more, and that, by the way, corresponds to like the fight and flight response, the trauma response. The other side is more what we call satiation, and it's more the freeze response, but it's like a slowing down, numbing, detaching, escaping, and food belongs right in there. Television, shopping, alcohol, benzodiazepines, all the kind of opioids, all the kind of downer drugs are in there. And absolutely, TV is a really effective way to numb. And I'll tell you why a little bit. It's even more dangerous than some other things. It has something in common with a computer screen or a telephone, a mobile phone. That is, it's a screen. And screens are hypnotic. Screens kind of put us into a trance, and it's a numbing feature. We just kind of fall into it and escape. So yes, absolutely. It's a way to do it, to escape and check out. And it can be problematic. It can be really problematic for people, just like any addiction.
Now, just to be clear, I was having a bad day yesterday. I happen to like all the Star Wars stuff and the Marvel stuff. So I coughed up for Disney Plus because I wanted to numb out last night. And that was okay. I was aware of what I was doing. I didn't go to the liquor store so I can numb out. I didn't turn on my computer and look at porn so I could numb out. TV is not an addiction for me. It's, I watch maybe 30 minutes of TV a day normally. Eating is not an addiction for most people, but some people eat their feelings and it becomes an addiction. So it's something to keep an eye on. But it's okay for people to have coping mechanisms that involve numbing out briefly. I mean, or David, do you have thoughts on that? I mean, where do we draw the line?
It's a really good question. I don't have an easy answer for that, because it's true. Human beings are kind of wired to have a couple of different modes. Meditation is a way that I kind of alter my mood. I guess it's a different brain state, different brain waves, different place to go and kind of step out of my life into a quiet space. I think other people do that with substances or TV. I think for the non-addict, doing that once in a while is normal and not harmful really at all. But I think where the danger lies is for someone who is addictive, to really be careful of that, because I was telling people today, I'm not a gambler, never been even vaguely interested in gambling, but I am a real addict. And I don't want to push it because I know if I really tried, I could probably get addicted to gambling. So I treat it with respect. And I think the same way for TV, bad days, sometimes I just turn off the phone and just, isolate for a couple hours or a day or something. And just, that's fine. Then I'm back. But I think we just have to be careful about the repetitive nature of some of those escape mechanisms.
Yeah, and as a recovering addict, I'm not a food addict, but I know what Oreos do to me. I don't buy Oreos. I mean, because I will eat the entire family pack of Oreos in one sitting with, a half a gallon of milk, and then I want to vomit. But I can't stop myself. So I just don't, I don't go to the casino like David. I just don't go.
Yeah.
So I'm aware that I'm an addict, and I will always look for a way, the easy out from my feelings. I'll always look for the easy out.
And that's just, let me say, we both have a lot of years of recovery. And I think, so that's, I think part of, I kind of have accepted that impulse will be with me the rest of my life, no matter how much I work on my recovery. And that's okay, as long as I know about it and prepared for it. But I think sometimes people have an expectation that things will be very different. And it's true that I don't have the cravings, I don't have the urges or the triggers, but I have a healthy respect for potential behaviors that could become addictive.
Okay, you described my ex-sex addict in your comments about validation. Can you speak about what motivates an addict to shift his social media use and/or start to get insight about going after external validation? And then the follow-up question is, will this be addressed in a 12-step program?
Yeah, so great question. I think the shift starts to occur when there's some awareness. And I think this is after the behavior has stopped, the addictive behavior, because I think when they're in that behavior, it's really hard to have these kind of connections and thoughts because our thinking is distorted when we're in that fantasy zone. But in recovery, we start to get clear-headed and start to realize through interaction, often interaction with AA or NA or whatever 12-step program peers, how we interact and how we connect or not. And I think that's the motivation where we start to see other people, we start to have models that are healthier than we are, peer support. We start to realize that this old way of doing stuff isn't working so well for us anymore. And like any kind of behavioral decision, that when the pain of this coping mechanism gets high enough, I'll give it up, I'll make a change. And I think that starts to happen in recovery. And I would say, yeah, the steps go a long way toward this. I think the step 4 particularly is maybe the first time people have a chance to look at some of these things and their behaviors and really examine how it's working for them or not, and really start to look at this. And I think following through the rest of the steps too, it's woven in there, sometimes not with that same language, but I think the idea of self-examination and sort of giving up patterns and ways of coping that don't serve us anymore, and more importantly, replacing them with things that are healthier. I think that's all kind of built in. But I think a lot of this, this is not an academic exercise. You cannot read a book and do this. This is an experiential learning, meaning it has to be done through your interactions with other people, from feedback with other people, from examining, gee, how am I feeling that this person just said this whatever it was to me? How am I reacting? What's going on? And gradually through these interactions with people, we start to learn healthier ways of coping. So I think it is a process, and it's definitely woven into the 12-step program, in my opinion. Scott, you're muted.
I am muted. Okay, I'm the betrayed spouse of a sex addict. My husband is in recovery and working the steps with his sponsor. We've just started to work step 1 together as part of RCA, which is Recovering Couples Anonymous. Great program. I also just started reading Scott and Kristen's book, Life Anonymous. Yay! And I'm wondering your thoughts about whether the RCA step work would be different than working the steps as a non-addict, or said another way, would working the steps both as a couple and separately as a non-addict have different benefits and value? If so, what would be the distinction or difference? So in RCA, you work the 12 steps together as a couple. The books that Kristen and I wrote together called Life Anonymous, I describe how addicts work the steps, and then Kristen follows with a description of how non-addicts can work the same step and benefit from it. And there are definitely some differences.
So Scott, can you address this?
Yeah, I mean, I will, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too, but I think you're going to be working on certain things as a couple, and you're going to be working on certain things as an individual, and they're not necessarily going to be the same things. Right. As a couple, you're going to be, we're powerless over the fact that we sometimes don't communicate well, or whatever it is. And as an individual, it might be I'm powerless over the fact that my husband doesn't isn't always honest with me, or things like that. I'm powerless over the fact that I get angry about the fact that he cheated on me. There's going to be a slightly different focus, and I do believe that working them both as a couple and both of you working them as individuals is definitely the way to go. If you're willing to put that effort in, I applaud you, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So,
yeah, I would say really the same thing. I kind of compare it to different kinds of therapy where we have individual therapy where the person works on their own thing, and then couples therapy. Really, the client in couples therapy is not him or her, or him and him or her, but the client is the relationship. And in many ways, the step work you're doing in RCA is focusing on the nature and dynamics of that relationship, as opposed to each of your individual strengths or weaknesses or issues or whatever. So I think there's great benefit in working all of that. Definitely different focuses.
Yeah, and the addict is the one with the problem, with the identified problem. So a lot of times betrayed partners and loved ones of addicts, say, why should I work the steps? Why should I reach out for support? I'm not the one with the problem. And the fact of the matter is you don't have to. You aren't the one with the problem. But you've been betrayed, you've been hurt, you've been wounded. You deserve some support, and you deserve to heal. And these programs and the steps are designed to help you heal. And coming to a session like this is designed to help you heal. So I'm so glad you're here, and all the other betrayed partners who are here, because you deserve this. It's not like you necessarily need it, but you certainly deserve to get this support. And I love your willingness too. That's awesome.
And Scott, where can they get your and Kristen's book?
They can hold on. Right here. Life Anonymous with this very pretty cover. So you can find it on Amazon. Just type in Life Anonymous and my name or Kristen Snowden, and it'll pop right up. So yeah.
Great.
This is the next question. Yes, 3 years out from D-Day, with an addict spouse who refuses therapy, saying he doesn't trust therapists. Just 2 days ago, I found text messages on his phone from unknown sources that referenced male enhancement pills. I found these in the past when I also found porn. His response was that he didn't know why he gets the text. Also, he has an issue with following rules, many speeding tickets, loss of job due to not following rules. Something was found on his phone right up 2 months ago that he was asked not to use a piece of equipment that way, but he did it anyway, so he's probably looking at porn at work. How can I ever feel safe with this person? It seems impossible to me because if his behavior is brought up, he twists and the blame shifts.
Yeah. So there's a lot of red flags here for me, obviously. 3 years out, I assume with some opportunities for treatment or recovery not really accepted. I'm not seeing much in terms of growth or healing here from what you described. First of all, refusing therapy, that's a bad sign in general, right? I think because there's something about the surrender and the willingness to do self-examination that's really essential as a really foundation of recovery. And if somebody is refusing to kind of take a look at that or to look at themselves, that means to me they're kind of frozen or rigid in place and kind of locked into their system. So right off the bat, that's a bad sign. And then all the other kind of things you're finding are worrisome. Maybe one, not so much, but the patterns that you described, all of that added together equals some trouble. So I think you're justified in feeling unsafe because I don't think you see the whole story with whatever's going on with him. And and of course, getting the defensiveness if behavior is brought up. So there's a lot of red flags here. I think really it's kind of up to you to decide what you need to do for you in this situation. And that may be a boundary of therapy or some kind of recovery plan or something as a step toward resolving it. And then you have maybe more decisions to make about whether this is going to work out or not. But I don't see much willingness or surrender or recovery in what you described there. And that truly is worrisome.
Yeah, and I'm fixated on these unknown sources with male enhancement pills. Porn sites, if you join them, they sell your information to Viagra, people selling Viagra and male enhancement pills and penis enlargers. So he obviously joined a porn site at some point, and you found porn on his phone, so that seems likely. And the pattern of misusing company equipment. So many people get fired because they just get warned over and over about misusing company equipment, and they continue to do it anyway, which just screams addiction to me. I know there will be consequences. I know I will lose my job. I'm doing it anyway.
Right. And the other word I just want to attach to this whole thought is entitlement. This screams of entitlement as well. It's like, I deserve this, whatever the rules are. And that's also a kind of a bad sign.
Yeah. And then at the end, it's, if his behavior is brought up, he twists and shifts the blame. And that's classic active addict behavior. Well, if you didn't do this, I wouldn't need to do this. And again, it goes back to entitlement. And I'm sorry you're in this situation. It just sounds awful.
Yeah.
What sort of boundaries do you have? First of all, boundaries are not about keeping other people out. They're about letting them in safely, but you're not able to let him in safely right now. And you have a need. Your need here is, boundaries are about getting your needs met in healthy ways, and you have a need to feel safe in this relationship. And I'm just not sure what kind of boundary could be set that would help you feel safe in this relationship. Do you have any specific thoughts on that, David?
I think it would have to involve getting him moving towards some kind of self-examination and therapy work, and because this is all gaslighting and defenses and walls and barriers, and so I think really I would want to see some evidence of growth, going to therapy, going to meetings, really working on himself, working toward recovery, and then there would be a consequence if that doesn't happen. Then you would do X, Y, or Z. But I think that anything you could do to motivate him toward starting to heal, because I don't see any sign of that right now. And it might be, many addicts don't take action until they're up against a hard deadline of maybe a relationship or a job. He's willing to lose his job. But I think that sometimes that those consequences do have an impact. And I will say, it's really important to think through your consequences before you state them, because if you set a boundary and a consequence and that boundary is violated and you don't follow through, then the problem's gotten even worse. So think carefully. But I would also, you might, I don't know if you have support yourself, but you might find some therapy useful in terms of your next steps, what you can do to make you feel safe and what you need in this situation.
Yeah, actually, I think I was going to say a good therapist or a good support group of other betrayed spouses is a great place to turn to for advice on setting boundaries and implementing boundaries, because they can keep you from making mistakes. And because setting boundaries is really sort of complicated and difficult, and it's easy to do it wrong.
Yeah.
Your boundaries aren't really about trying to control his behavior. They're about what you're going to do if his bad behavior continues. They're about you, not him, because he's going to do what he's going to do. He's either going to choose to get well or he's not going to choose to get well. If he chooses to get well, great. But if he chooses not to get well, you have to figure out, where are your limits and what are you going to put up with and what are you going to do if he continues to not get well?
Right.
And that's a tough one. And
hard decisions for sure.
Get feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I like this topic. I have no problem seeing my issues and do well with knowing what they are. I can't change a bunch of defects all at once anyway. I like the topic of self-acceptance a lot. I see very few people being sweet and gentle and accepting of themselves. Do you think most people can see their defects but have more trouble seeing assets and accepting themselves? Oh God, yes. David, your turn.
Yeah, when I did my first fourth step, my main big one, I was presenting it, and my sponsor at the time said, well, you don't have any assets or any strengths or positive elements in here. And it never even occurred to me that would be something to look at. And with, it was character defects, but it was not balanced at all in terms of a real picture of who I was. So I think, yes, the answer is yes, we have a hard time seeing that. I think we are hypersensitive to our flaws or our perceived flaws, and very careful with ourselves with these boundaries and false selves to protect ourselves. So it's really hard. And once we have that practice of a lifetime, there's something called negativity bias, where we kind of always sort of see the negative stuff. It's the glass half full version of life. And so we start to really see the flaws in us, and they get magnified, and we become extremely self-conscious about them. And that becomes kind of a focal point for us. And it's really difficult to see positive things. In fact, a very common early in recovery, or very common in our groups, is seeking integrity. If somebody expresses a compliment or a sincere positive statement to someone else in the group, that the receiver of that often has trouble accepting it or hearing it because it doesn't match what they feel inside. So if somebody said, you did a great job, that person feels like they always do everything like crap, and so it doesn't match. So part of the healing is learning how to hear what people are saying and accept it, really bring it in. And so oftentimes, we say just a simple thank you. Just take it in, don't refute it, don't deny it, don't try to deflect, just say thank you and really try to hear it. So I think, I think we just, at least addicts don't naturally see positive qualities, but that certainly is something that can be remedied with some positive feedback.
Yeah, when I'm working with guys, particularly in my work groups, sometimes I'll ask the guys, tell me 10 things that are not going well, or that you don't like about yourself, or that you're angry about. And they can just spit those out rapid fire without even thinking. They can come up with 100 in about a minute and a half. If I say, tell me 10 things you like about yourself and that you're grateful for, we'll be there all night. I mean, it'll take all night. It's like pulling teeth. 10 things you don't like about yourself, I can come up with that so fast. 10 things I like about myself, really hard. The longer I'm in recovery, the more I've learned to get some validation internally. And I'm so grateful for that, but it was a process, and it's an ongoing process. And I also liked your statement, I can't change a bunch of defects all at once. And I so agree with that. When I did my fourth step, David mentioned the fourth step earlier, big believer in the fourth step. That's when I realized I was the problem, not you. So I had a list of my character defects, and I realized, okay, let's just pick the most glaring one and let's work on that one this month. And I did affirmations every day, and as part of my prayer, I asked my higher power for help with it, and I still do that. I work on one character defect a month. And then the next month I go to another character defect, and just the awareness of it, I get better for a while, and then I backslide. So a year later, I go back and work on the same defect.
Wow, yeah. Scott, I really love that. I did not know that about you, and I really love that kind of a monthly focus. It makes it manageable and realistic.
I've been doing that for years because I realized I can only do one at a time.
Yeah.
So.
Otherwise, it's so easy for us to get overwhelmed and flooded with stuff and just give up everything, right? So I think you have to be able to separate it out.
10, it's just, I'm going to go into a shame spiral.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, next one. What about the addict has admitted to pushing me away so as not to be found out, but now blames me for not giving him attention as the reason he watched porn and cheated with other women.
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of sex addict behavior here, right? The blaming, the shifting of responsibility, the dishonesty, the pushing away, the entitlement, the only, if I would get XYZ at home, I wouldn't have to look for it elsewhere, all that stuff that we hear. So, and I assume the follow-up is there. I moved out, right, a year ago. So I think that was a good move because this person was really stuck in their addiction.
This is the question where we had all the red flags a few minutes ago. So yeah. I mean, as a therapist, David, you would never say to somebody, really get out of this relationship, would you? But you might applaud them when they make that decision on their own. How does that work? Like if you can plainly see, oh my God, get out now, but you can't say that. I mean, have you ever said that to somebody?
I think when there was some element of danger in a couple of situations, I did, yeah. But for the most part, a therapist isn't supposed to make a decision for the person. It's supposed to guide the person toward that decision or toward what best decision for them there is. And so I think it's a matter of insight and asking questions and probing and helping people gain awarenesses. And I think just what I see is just kind of looking at to pull back the curtains on the process a little bit, really looking at what their beliefs are, what kind of stuff they might not be consciously aware of, maybe informing this and help make that conscious. Just kind of shine light on different things that help them realize the situation and take the action that's appropriate for them. You know, I can't decide for anybody, but I can certainly help make it an informed decision on their part. That's my role.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, can you explain a little bit about what gaslighting is? I know we talk about this off and on in this webinar, but it seems like there's some gaslighting in this relationship.
Yeah, so gaslighting is a term that's found a lot of popularity lately, but it involves basically just misleading, outright denial, just shifting blame, making excuses, just outright bald lies with a straight face, and just misdirecting, fogging, making things cloudy, misinformation. And this is all this kind of foggy cloud of stuff to kind of take the attention and clarity off the situation. And it's to mislead and misdirect and confuse. And it is. And because especially on the part of a partner or spouse who see what they see, you know, it's the kind of don't believe your lying eyes kind of thing. And they know what they feel. And yet they're being told right to their face with a straight face from somebody they may have, you know, shared a bed with for 20 years and in a marriage, that this is what it is, when it's absolutely not. And, you know, that the level of that betrayal is we see why there's trauma. I mean, that's a huge talk about mistrust. That dynamic is not unusual, and it's extremely hurtful. But I think that it's that kind of cloudiness of words that confuse and misdirect.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm trying to get my partner who I'm betraying, you know, I'm denying my partner's reality. You know, no, this isn't lipstick, it's marinara sauce. And it's like, no, it's lipstick. You know, no, it's just denying it over and over. And Dr. Rob mentions this in Out of the Doghouse and Sex Addiction 101. I think we talked about gaslighting. You know, it's not that the betrayed partner is a sucker and is clueless or you know, intentionally wants to be deceived. It's that it happens really slowly. You know, the first lie is, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to call you. I was working late on a project. I fell asleep. Sorry, I got home so late. And you're 2 years into your relationship and you want to believe your partner, and that one makes sense. You know, he's got a stressful job and he conked out at his desk. Okay, you can buy that. But you know, 2 years later, when he's saying, I told you I was going out of town on Friday at breakfast, but you were a little groggy. You must not have heard me. It's your fault that you're mad that I was gone all weekend and you didn't know where I was. That's a whopper that sometimes a betrayed partner will believe, because you just it's like putting a frog in a pot of warm water. Feels nice, and then you keep turning the heat up and the frog doesn't realize it's being boiled, and you can cook the frog and it doesn't even know it's being cooked. And that's kind of what gaslighting is for betrayed partners. It just gets ramped up and ramped up and ramped up, and suddenly you don't know what's up and what's down and what's left and what's right, because you're just spinning all the time. You take in reality and your partner denies it, and you're not believing yourself. And that's really, really difficult. So it requires a lot of reality checking with supportive, empathetic people, other women, therapists, family members.
Right.
He told me this. Does that sound real? No, it really doesn't. Sounds like a lie. Trust your instincts. But a lot of people have been gaslighted. It takes a while before you can learn to trust your gut again.
Yeah, and that trust is so kind of easily broken, and it's really hard to repair if it can be repaired, right? It takes time and patience and hard work. That's why that earlier question about RCA, the Recovering Couples Anonymous, is so great, because it really does take that kind of work to repair that and get that trust and vulnerability back, safety back in the relationship. That emotional safety. That's a casualty in this dynamic for sure.
Yeah. I think that was our last question. Do you guys have any more questions? We've got 7 minutes left. Type something in real quick.
We usually don't have enough time for all questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
usually we don't have enough time. I had something else I was going to ask. Oh, we got some real quick. There we go.
Okay.
Hi, betrayed spouse here. Do either of you know if the sex addict, when using Covenant Eyes, this is a filtering and monitoring software, is supposed to go online while only using their browser as opposed to going directly to Google, Microsoft Edge, etc.? Thank you. I think this is probably my bailiwick.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I've done a lot of reviews of these products. Covenant Eyes is one of the better ones. Net Nanny is another good one. If it is set up and installed properly, it will impact all of the available browsers. So just because I'm using Google or Microsoft or Bing or Edge or whatever, Covenant Eyes is going to cover all of that stuff. The lesser programs don't. But the Covenant Eyes, Net Nanny, these are not guarantees of sobriety. They're speed bumps that will slow an addict down. He needs to put them on all of his devices. I'm assuming the addict's a he. Phone, laptop, tablet, all of the devices need the filtering and monitoring software installed. You as the betrayed partner should not be the keeper of the keys for that. Probably his sponsor or his therapist should. You as the partner probably shouldn't be getting the monitoring reports. That should again go to his sponsor and his therapist. It's just better that way. But these programs, the good programs are good, but you can install a browser that it doesn't recognize. You can go buy a new phone and use it in secret. You can use someone else's phone. You can go to the library. There's a million ways around it. So these are a tool that helps with sobriety, but they're not a guarantee of sobriety. They're not the be all end all. And if you put them on a kid's phone, they're just going to be worked around it in about 30 seconds because kids know how to do that. But I'm a big believer in having those just as a speed bump. David, do you have any thoughts beyond that?
No, I think that's true. And I think it's a strategy. Like many, we try to slow down or put as many barriers between the impulse to use or act out and the actual acting out. But an addict with determination can certainly get around them. But it's a matter of kind of slowing down, hopefully. And what we're doing is buying time, right? So if I'm an addict and I'm triggered, I'm going to act out, making it as complicated as possible. Hopefully, there's time for me to kind of come to my senses and make the right decision.
Yeah.
But it's not foolproof for sure. I agree.
Okay, how often should a sex addict attend meetings? This is a person who's been in recovery for a year. The question is from the betrayed partner. Betrayed partner feels like the addict is not working the program like I think he should. He only attends one in-person meeting a week. And the other follow-up is, can I ask how he's doing in the program? So how many meetings should he be going to? And is it okay to ask how he's doing?
I think certainly in the early, and this person has a year out, but I think I like the idea of 90, if not more, in the beginning, right? I'm meeting every day. And I myself felt I needed to keep that up for a long time, and multiple years in recovery. I think I've seen people do just well, cutting back the number of meetings a week. One a week though, I think at a year, in my opinion, is probably too few. My gauge around a year is 3 meetings a week, although it just depends on individuals and stuff. Now you say one in person, maybe he's doing something on Zoom. Other times, I don't know. But I think generally speaking, at a year out, I think 1 a week is probably not enough. Maybe it depends on what else he's doing, if he's in a group therapy or seeing therapy or another kind of work groups or something. But I think I personally would want to up the amount of meetings. Can you ask how he's doing a program? I think there's some weird thoughts about this sometimes. People get defensive. I think it's a fair question to ask in general how he's doing. He has the right to kind of share details or not. But Scott, what do you think about that? I think a spouse has the right to kind of get a sense.
Absolutely. I think it's perfectly fine to say, hey, I just, have you talked to your sponsor this week? What step are you working? Are you sponsoring anybody? Did you learn anything new this week? You don't need specifics. You just need to know he's there and he's working on stuff. And I agree with David. 1 meeting a week. I don't care how long you've been sober. I just turned 19 in this program. I try to do at least 3 meetings a week, and I try to do something for my recovery every single day.
Right.
Even if it's only 10 or 15 minutes on the phone with somebody, I do something beyond my work. I do something personal for my personal recovery every day, because frankly, I drank and used and acted out every day. I had plenty of time for that, so I should be able to carve out a few minutes or an hour or an hour and a half to stay sober and keep my life on track. So once a week. I don't know what else he's doing, but once a week is a little thin in my book. All right, now we're out of time. But let's take one more. What about group therapy every 2 weeks, therapy once a week, and talks to other addicts in recovery every day from each group? So he's in group therapy every 2 weeks, therapy once a week, that's individual, and talks to other addicts who are in recovery every day.
Okay, we are over time, but I just really quickly want to say therapy is not 12-step and 12-step is not therapy, right? So I applaud the group therapy, individual therapy, great. Talking to addicts every day in recovery, but what is glaringly missing here is any kind of 12-step involvement or 12-step recovery program, which I think is an essential piece as well. So that's the one big, the kind of what's missing from the statement thing there, in my opinion.
Yeah, the best outcomes involve individual therapy, group therapy, and 12-step work.
Right.
And if you want to throw support groups and drop in discussion groups like we have on sex and relationship healing, in the mix, great. I think it'll lead to even better outcomes. But 12-step is missing from that statement. And and it's important. So, okay, we're out of time. Thank you. We got a big flurry. As soon as I said we didn't have any questions, we got a big flurry. Save them for next week, especially the one about Havaning, because I have no idea what that is. I'm going to look it up. We'll talk about it next week. Bring it back. So we'll see you next week.
Okay. Good night.
Anything you want to say to take us out, David?
No, just remember to validate it from the inside out. That's the way to do it.
Okay. Thanks. We'll see you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.